silver and black, two colors that shine like armor under the lights, and sometimes cut like blades in the dark. Tonight, we unsealed 10 stories the scoreboard never showed. A rookie who never played a snap, yet lost his life for the Shield. A fearless safety whose most famous hit haunted him to the grave. A speedster who outran defenders, but not fate. These are the men who paid the ultimate price for daring to wear the Raiders' colors. Stay with me, because this list isn't a simple recap of famous tragedies. We'll dig beneath headlines and locker room legends to uncover little-known twists, secret health battles, unspoken family deals, and the chilling chain of events that turned triumph into heartbreak. Every chapter peels back another layer of silver paint to reveal the cost in blood, bone, or freedom. By the end, you'll understand why the Raiders' mystique is equal parts glory and gravestone, and why, even in loss, Raider Nation never forgets its own. If you think you know these tales, prepare to be surprised. If you've never heard them, prepare to be moved. Welcome to History of Raiders, your vault for untold stories of the silver and black. Smash that subscribe button, ring the bell, and march with us into the shadows where legends are forged and sometimes broken. Number 1, The Quiet Guardian, Rich Stevens. Rich Stevens wasn't a household name, and he never made the highlight reels. But in the mid-90s, he stood in the trenches for the Raiders, quietly doing the gritty work that keeps quarterbacks upright and running backs in motion. Offensive linemen like Stevens rarely get the spotlight. Their role is sacrifice. Snap after snap, they take the hits so others can shine. And that's exactly what Rich did, without complaint, without drama. He was drafted in 1993 and played through the mid-decade years when the Raiders were caught between eras, still fighting for relevance, still chasing the ghost of the 80s. For Stevens, the silver and black wasn't just a jersey, it was a badge of purpose. He wasn't a star, but he was steady, dependable, a man who earned his paycheck with bruised hands and battered knees. But life after football, that's where the real silence began. Like many linemen from his generation, Stevens slipped out of the public eye once he left the league. No endorsement deals, no NFL Network interviews, just the quiet drift of time. Then came the news. Rich Stevens had died. He was just 59, a few weeks shy of his 60th birthday. The cause wasn't made public. What we do know is that it happened suddenly. One moment he was here, the next, gone. The Raiders community mourned deeply. Former teammates posted tributes. Raiders alumni pages turned black in his honor. For those who watched him work, it wasn't just his size or strength that stood out. It was his resolve. He wasn't flashy. He was a foundation. And like many foundations, his value was noticed most when he was no longer there. His passing didn't dominate the sports news cycle. There were no ESPN specials or retrospectives. But inside Raider Nation, the loss ran deep. Another soldier of the Shield, gone too soon. Number 2, gone before the first snap. Leon Bender. Leon Bender was supposed to be the future. In 1998, the Oakland Raiders used their second-round draft pick to select him, a dominant defensive lineman from Washington State. At just 22 years old, Bender had everything teams look for: size, strength, and the raw aggression needed to tear through offensive lines. He had helped lead the Cougars to the Rose Bowl. Scouts loved his motor. Coaches praised his focus. His story was just beginning. But beneath the surface, there was a hidden danger. Bender had epilepsy, a neurological disorder that causes seizures. It wasn't widely known to the public, but those close to him were aware. He had managed it throughout college. He never let it slow him down, never used it as an excuse. To most people, he looked invincible in pads and a helmet. Just weeks after the draft, Bender traveled to Atlanta to train with his agent. He was working hard, preparing for his first NFL season, living in the moment every young player dreams of. But in that quiet space between the workouts and the bright lights, tragedy struck. On May 30th, 1998, Bender suffered a fatal seizure in his sleep. He died in his agent's home, never having played a single down in the NFL. The news stunned the Raiders organization and the football world. How could someone so young, so gifted, be gone just like that? Teammates were heartbroken. Coaches were shaken. The locker he had never used became a shrine of sorts, a silent reminder of what might have been. In a league built on toughness, it was a rare moment of fragility, proof that even the strongest bodies can hide silent battles. Leon Bender's name faded from the headlines quickly, but not from the hearts of those who knew him. His story remains one of the most heartbreaking what-ifs in Raider history. Number 3. The Assassin's Shadow. Jack Tatum. Jack Tatum didn't just play football. He struck fear with every step. Known across the league as the Assassin, he earned a reputation for bone-rattling hits and a cold, calculating presence in the secondary. Drafted in the first round by the Oakland Raiders in 1971, Tatum became a key piece of the team's intimidating defense throughout the 1970s. He didn't care about being liked. He cared about being feared, and he succeeded. His game was built on intimidation. He roamed the backfield like a predator, waiting for receivers to wander into his kill zone. But in 1978, one collision changed everything. During a preseason game, Tatum delivered a brutal hit on New England Patriots wide receiver Darryl Stingley. The impact shattered his spinal cord. He was paralyzed for life. Tatum walked away from the play. Stingley never walked again. What followed was a public storm. Critics slammed Tatum as reckless, even cruel. Supporters defended him as a product of a brutal era in football. The league didn't penalize him. There were no flags on the play. But the court of public opinion stayed split. Tatum, for his part, never apologized. He insisted the hit was clean, legal, and part of the game. But the shadow of that moment followed him for the rest of his life.
In later years, Tatum's own body turned on him. Diabetes took its toll, leading to the amputation of both legs. Once a symbol of physical dominance, he now fought private battles with his health. He died in 2010 at the age of 61 from a heart attack. Jack Tatum lived by a code: hit hard, don't hesitate, never back down. But the same legacy that made him a Raiders icon also made him one of football's most controversial figures. His story is a collision of glory and regret, raw power and tragic consequence. Number 4. The Wall That Fell, Dan Birdwell. Dan Birdwell wasn't the kind of player who sought headlines. He didn't need to. His presence on the field said everything. Standing tall on the defensive line during the Raiders' rise in the American Football League of the 1960s, Birdwell brought an unmatched intensity. Teammates remembered him not only for his strength, but for the fire in his eyes when the ball was snapped. He wasn't just a player. He was a wall, a force, a man who made the opposing quarterback rethink everything. Birdwell was part of the 1967 Raiders team that dominated the AFL and made it to Super Bowl II. That squad was tough, physical, and mean. Birdwell fit right in. He played every snap like it was personal. He was known for his toughness, but also for being thoughtful off the field, a man with a deep sense of loyalty to the team and to the Raider way. He once said, "You have to play this game like somebody just hit your mother with a 2x4. That quote lived on long after his name began to fade from the spotlight. But Birdwell's time was cut tragically short. In 1978, just over a decade after that legendary Raiders season, he died suddenly of a heart attack. He was only 37 years old. There was no long illness, No long goodbye, just a life and career that ended far too soon. It shocked former teammates and fans who still remembered his strength on the field. How could someone so fierce, so full of energy, be gone so quickly? What makes Dan Birdwell's story hit harder is how quietly it ended. No big farewell, no farewell tour. One moment he was a Raider legend in the minds of those who watched him play. The next, he was gone. Another name remembered by those who understand that wearing silver and black is not just a uniform. For some, it becomes a legacy, and sometimes a sacrifice. Number 5. The fighter who hid his pain, Eric Turner. Eric Turner was once hailed as one of the most promising safeties in the NFL. A top draft pick by the Cleveland Browns in 1991, he made an immediate impact with his hard-hitting style and incredible field vision. Turner wasn't just another defender, he was a game changer. By the time he arrived in Oakland in 1997, the Raiders saw in him a veteran presence who could anchor their secondary and restore some swagger to the defense. He brought with him a reputation as a ball hawk and enforcer. In his first season with the Raiders, he didn't disappoint. Interceptions, tackles, leadership. His play was sharp, and his instincts hadn't dulled. He was still that same player who once led the league in interceptions. But behind the scenes, something wasn't right. Turner began missing practices. His physical appearance subtly changed. Whispers started to spread. Was it just fatigue? An old injury flaring up? Then came the rumors. Quiet at first, barely spoken above a whisper. Some said it was stomach cancer. Others weren't sure if it was cancer at all. Turner, a proud and private man, kept the truth to himself for as long as he could. He didn't want pity. He didn't want headlines. Eventually, his condition could no longer be hidden. The strength that made him feared on the field began to fade. He was rushed to the hospital in early 2000. Within days, the unthinkable became reality. Eric Turner was gone, just 31 years old. His sudden death stunned Raider Nation. Teammates, fans, and coaches were blindsided. Few knew he had been sick. Fewer still understood just how serious it had been. Turner's decision to hide his illness until the very end only added to the heartbreak. In the end, the man who once hit like a truck and read plays like a book met a silent, devastating opponent and kept fighting until he couldn't anymore. Number 6. The lightning that never struck twice, Cliff Branch. Cliff Branch wasn't just fast. He was lightning in shoulder pads. A wide receiver who didn't just outrun defenders, but embarrassed them. Branch was the deep threat every corner feared and every quarterback loved. Drafted by the Oakland Raiders in 1972, he carved his name into the franchise's legacy over a 14-season career. His speed wasn't just elite, it was record-breaking. At the University of Colorado, he also ran track, clocking times that could have taken him to the Olympics. But football was his true battleground, and he made it count. Branch was a core piece of the Raiders' golden years. He helped the team win 3 Super Bowls, XI, XV, and XIIV, and made 4 Pro Bowls. But his stats don't tell the whole story. Cliff Branch was the kind of player who could change the course of a game with one catch. He stretched defenses, opened the field, and punished anyone who tried to cover him one-on-one. He had 501 career receptions for over 8,600 yards and 67 touchdowns, numbers that stood tall for a player in an era that prioritized the run game. For years, fans and analysts argued that Branch deserved a spot in the Hall of Fame. His exclusion puzzled many. It wasn't until 3 years after his death that the Hall finally made it right, inducting him posthumously in 2022. The way he died shook Raider Nation. In August 2019, just one day after turning 71, he was found dead in a hotel room in Bullhead City, Arizona. Authorities ruled it natural causes. No foul play, no long illness, just sudden silence. He had reportedly been in good spirits, enjoying life, and even hoping to see himself enshrined in Canton. The timing felt cruel. A man who gave everything to football, who had waited decades for recognition, didn't live to hear the crowd cheer his name inside the hall.
Number 7. A legend left behind, Fred Biletnikoff. Cliff Branch wore silver and black with pride and ran with it like no one else ever could. Fred Biletnikoff was once the very definition of a Raider legend. With his sticky hands, sharp routes, and trademark use of stickum that turned footballs into magnets,
he helped shape the golden era of the Oakland Raiders. Drafted in 1965, Biletnikoff quickly became a cornerstone of Al Davis's vision, a wide receiver who didn't just catch the ball, but controlled the pace of the game. He wasn't the fastest on the field, but he was surgical in execution. In Super Bowl XI, he didn't score a touchdown, but he set up 3 of them. That performance earned him MVP honors, and it cemented his place in NFL history. But once the cheers faded and the locker room emptied, Biletnikoff's life turned down a quieter, darker road. He retired in 1978 with over 8,000 receiving yards and a career that should have kept his name in the spotlight. Instead, he slowly disappeared from the mainstream football conversation. Years passed before he was finally inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 1988, long after his impact had been felt. For many fans, he became a name they heard in old highlight reels, but rarely saw celebrated. Behind the scenes, Fred endured personal tragedy that few could bear. In 1999, his daughter Tracy was murdered by her boyfriend, a story that shook him to his core. That loss led Fred and his wife Angela to found the Biletnikoff Foundation, dedicated to helping young women dealing with substance abuse and domestic violence. It was a powerful way to turn pain into purpose, but it also pulled him further from the NFL spotlight. He remained tied to the Raiders as a coach and ambassador, but the game he once ruled seemed to move on without him. New stars rose, media cycles shifted, and younger fans often didn't know his story. The man who once defined clutch playoff football found himself on the edge of obscurity, remembered only when Hall of Fame reels aired or vintage jersey sales spiked. His fall wasn't loud. It was slow, quiet, and deeply human. Number 8. The Fall of Speed. Henry Ruggs III. Henry Ruggs III wasn't just fast, he was blazing. Clocking in at a jaw-dropping 4.27 seconds in the 40-yard, he was drafted 12th overall by the Las Vegas Raiders in 2020. The team saw him as the next great deep threat, a weapon to stretch the field like the legends before him. For a moment, the future looked golden. Ruggs brought energy, excitement, and raw promise to a franchise built on speed and swagger. But promise doesn't protect you from poor choices. On November 2nd, 2021, everything changed. Ruggs was involved in a deadly crash in Las Vegas while driving his Corvette at speeds over 150 miles per hour. The impact killed a 23-year-old woman, Tina Tintor, and her dog. It was a horrific scene, one that shocked not just Raider Nation, but the entire NFL. Reports revealed Ruggs was intoxicated, well over the legal limit, and carrying a loaded firearm in the vehicle. In the matter of seconds, a rising NFL career had shattered. The Raiders acted swiftly. Within hours of the arrest, Ruggs was released from the team. The man once hailed as a game-changer was now facing decades behind bars. It wasn't just a fall from grace, it was a free fall. What makes Ruggs' story hit so hard is how sudden and violent the turn was. One day he was being compared to legends like Cliff Branch, and the next he became a cautionary tale. Fans were left stunned, the organization shaken. Behind the stats and highlight reels was a young man who made a devastating decision, and an innocent life lost as a result. There are no easy answers in stories like this, only grief, regret, and what-ifs. The Silver and Black didn't just lose a receiver, it lost another chapter in a long book of heartbreaks. Number 9. The fan who bled for the Shield. Chester McGlockton Sr. Not every sacrifice made for the Silver and Black came from inside the huddle. Some of the most heartbreaking costs were paid far from the spotlight, by people whose names never made the headlines. One such man was Chester McGlockton Sr., not the star defensive lineman from the 90s, but his father. A lifelong Raiders fan, Chester Sr. devoted decades to following the team across states, working long hours in South Carolina factories to afford tickets, memorabilia, and satellite subscriptions just to watch his son and his team play. But Chester Sr.'s passion came with a toll. As his son was drafted by the Raiders in 1992, the elder McGlockton poured himself into the team's culture. He skipped medical appointments to make game day flights. He racked up debt buying Raiders gear for his church youth group. Over time, his health began to falter. Diabetes crept in, but he refused to slow down. He often said, "I bleed silver and black," even when the symptoms worsened. When Chester Jr. tragically died of heart failure in 2011 at just 42, it shattered the elder McGlockton's spirit. The team reached out, tributes were made, But for the father, the cost had already been paid in silence, through years of physical wear, emotional investment, and blind loyalty. He faded into quiet grief, rarely seen at games again. His story isn't the only one like this. Countless fans, blue-collar, working-class believers, have given up time, health, even relationships for the Raiders. They didn't wear the helmet, but they wore the burden. Whether on dusty tailgates or sleepless nights after a crushing loss, these people lived the highs and lows just as deeply. For them, silver and black wasn't just a color. It was a commitment that left marks you couldn't always see.
Number 10. The King Without a Throne, Al Davis. Al Davis was never a player on the field, but no one wore the silver and black with more fire in his soul. He didn't just lead the Raiders, he was the Raiders. For decades, Davis was the face, the voice, and the beating heart of the franchise. His motto, "Just win, maybe," wasn't a catchphrase, it was a war cry. Under his leadership, the Raiders became more than a football team. They became a symbol of rebellion, defiance, and power. Davis was a visionary, an outlaw in a suit. He fought the NFL when it tried to control him. He sued the league when they blocked his moves. And he built a culture where misfits became warriors. Cast-off players, overlooked coaches, and underdogs of every kind found a second chance in the silver and black. That was Davis's gift. He saw greatness in the rough edges. But the cost of building a dynasty on defiance was steep. As he aged, Davis became more isolated. His decisions were often questioned, his stubbornness criticized. He refused to give up control even as the game changed around him. By the early 2000s, the Raiders were struggling. Coaches came and went, draft picks failed, and the mystique that once terrified opponents began to fade. When Al Davis died in 2011, it didn't just mark the end of a man. It marked the end of an era. The team lost more than an owner. They lost their identity. The Coliseum felt emptier. The swagger faded. And for many fans, it felt like the soul of the franchise had slipped away. His son, Mark Davis, inherited the team, but the shadow of Al's legacy was impossible to escape. Al Davis didn't die in uniform. He didn't fall on the field. But his death changed the Raiders forever. In many ways, it was the final chapter in the book he had written for over 50 years. The silver and black are more than colors. They are a badge of grit, a banner of pride, and sometimes a symbol of painful sacrifice. Every uniform comes with weight, not just from shoulder pads, but from expectation, pressure, and the unrelenting force of legacy. We've seen how 10 individuals, each connected to the Raiders, walked into the fire for the team, the culture, and the nation. Some gave everything on the field, battling through pain, loss, and risk. Others fought different battles off the field, against time, illness, misfortune, or fate itself. These weren't just players or coaches, they were Raiders. And in the world of silver and black, that means something more. It means family. It means standing tall in the face of chaos. It means daring to live and sometimes fall for something greater than yourself. These 10 stories are a reminder that greatness comes at a price, but they also remind us of the strength it takes to wear the shield, to fight under the lights, and to leave behind a legacy even in silence. Wearers of silver and black may fall, but their legacy lives on. If you felt the impact of these stories, if even one name stayed with you, like this video and subscribe to History of Raiders. We tell the stories that others forget, the ones that matter, the ones that built the nation.